Hey everyone, it's me, T. Krulos, and laughing over there.
I'm Heidi Erickson.
What are you cracking up about already? We
Ooh,
just got
it's
started.
it's one of the stories we're going to talk about, and it just keeps getting better every time I read it. But I don't want to sell it too hard. What are we talking about this week, T? What's going on?
Oh, there's so
Oh,
much going on. Well, I wanted to start with because I'm excited about it, and I think I'm extra excited about this because I have not gotten out of the house in a while. But
yeah,
this weekend there is a show opening up, and you and me are going to go see it.
yeah,
It's called J.R.R. Tolkien, The Art of the Manuscript,
yeah. That's
and
going to be so cool.
yeah, it's such a cool story. So what happened was here in Milwaukee, there's a college called Marquette University, and in the 50s, they had a library director named William Reddy, and Marquette's a Catholic university, so this library director was especially interested in looking at authors that identified as Catholics,
Sure.
which Mr. Tolkien did. And so he picked up his books and he was like, "Hey, damn, this is some pretty good shit, you know? You
Right.
got these hobbits and elves and everything you could want." So he became a big fan of the books, and he was like, I'm gonna ask about acquiring his manuscripts." Now, keep in mind, this is like 1955 or 56. The last book of the Lord of the Rings series had just been published. So they're pretty new books, and
Yeah.
they were pretty successful when they first came out, but they were not legendary like they are today.
Right.
So he starts negotiations, and he ends up buying the original manuscript documents for The Hobbit,
Wow.
all three of the Lord of the Rings books,
Holy
uh,
crap.
and some lesser known works. Like Tolkien wrote this short novella that was called Father Giles of Ham. It was like a medieval farce, but it didn't take place in Middle Earth.
Mm.
Anyway, he's like, "All right, how much?" He buys all these for about $5,000, which at the time was a pretty good chunk of money,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
absolutely a very good investment because now
yeah.
you couldn't even guess how much those manuscripts would be worth.
Right. And like
Millions and millions for sure.
these aren't just pages of a handwritten book. Like Tolkien, when he wrote this book, the manuscript, he took all kinds of notes and like he did little drawings on the side and all kinds
Yeah,
of
yeah,
neat stuff like that.
yeah.
I'm really, really interested to see the pages where he introduces Tom Bombadil. I think that's my favorite. I want to see what that's like. I'm very into it. Tom Bombadil, if you haven't read the books, is like the best character in the books. It's a contentious argument that Tom Bombadil is the best character in the books, but I stand by it. And he was left out of the movies because I think for time and because for a movie, you want to keep the action going. And a lot of what Tom
Yeah,
Bombadil was doing there was really symbolic. It gave
yeah.
more to like the symbolism of it. And it's really interesting to me that this guy from Marquette, what was his name? The librarian's name?
William Reddy was the original person who started the archive in the
Right.
50s.
Right. And he was looking for authors that identified as Catholic. And it's really interesting because Tolkien did identify as Catholic for sure. But his book is filled with references to pagan gods and things of that nature. And at the same time, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a thing that was happening. And
Mm.
C.S. Lewis wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was just an overt Jesus fanfic, just like super duper
Right.
much. Like it was not subtle at all. There was a lion, and that was Jesus, and then there was the witch, who I guess was the devil. But like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien actually knew each other and were ostensibly friends, but also fought all the time because I think probably because C.S. Lewis was a douchebag. He comes across that way to me. I'm not saying it's for sure. I'm just saying that's the vibe he puts off. But it's interesting to me that at that time, this librarian had his choice of looking at both of those sets of books. And there was the one that was super overtly like a Jesus fanfic. And then there was Tolkien stuff where he literally wrote in a pagan god. And he was like, elves,
Yeah,
gnomes.
yeah. I mean, he was obviously immediately really impressed with this. I mean,
Right.
he put a lot of effort into acquiring those manuscripts, and
Yeah.
had such good sense to see that they were important,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when, like I said, people, they were selling well, but people weren't immediately like, wow, this is a incredible literary legacy.
Right, which
Yeah.
is crazy because like, and you know this now, you can be a Tolkien scholar. That can be your life,
Yeah.
where you just spend your whole life studying the works of Tolkien because he created several languages, speakable languages that you can learn. Like he
Mhm.
did that. Plus he wrote like the Silmarillion and all this. He created these vast, complex mythologies to go along with this. And it's super funny to me because when The Hobbit first came out, that was a children's book. It was meant to be a children's book, like a book that you read to your kids, a storybook at story time. I mean, so was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But when he started writing this, it was his way of processing what had happened to him in the war because he had been a soldier and that was pretty intense and not great. He says some really interesting things about escapism and fiction and reality and like being in a story that, like, if you've not looked up some Tolkien's just quotes about existing, you should. But primarily, he wrote it to read to children. And now it's this whole thing where we're going to go see it at this library, and they paid $5,000 for the manuscripts. And I'm sure the place will be packed. I know lots of people who are going because it's going to be super cool.
Yeah. So it's really cool because I wrote a short article for Milwaukee Magazine about the show, and I got to speak to William Fliss, who is the current curator of the collection. So he was able to give me a little bit, what people can expect to see. And well, one cool thing is there's going to be stuff in the display that has never been displayed or published before
What?
at all.
What?
It has a lot of stuff from Marquette's own collection, but they are also loaning some pieces from Oxford University, which is where Tolkien was a professor, and they are the
Yeah.
other like huge archive of his work.
Dude,
So
how terrifying would it be to have Tolkien as your professor? Not not intimidating at all. Oh my god. What was he a professor of? I don't remember.
medieval history, I believe.
Yeah, you're fucked. There's no way you're skating through that class. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yep. Yep.
Um, And here, this is the thing he told me that is the most intriguing, and I have very purposely not gone online Googling for this, even though I wanted to. But he said that one page in the display is a page that they believe very strongly is a page that Tolkien wept onto because the scene was so touching to him that he began to cry, and so his tear stains are actually on
Oh
this
my
page.
god. I am gonna be just a mess. I'm gonna be just absolutely a mess.
He
And
said,
you're
I'm
oh,
not going to tell you what the scene is because I want people to go and see it for themselves. But it certainly adds a certain power to
yeah.
seeing that he was so moved that he cried while he was writing it.
That's intense. Now, your producer is coming with us as well, our friend Alicia, right? We're all going
Yeah.
together.
Mhm.
Is she going to be filming? Because she's going to catch me just blubbering like a child, like the end of Old Yeller. It's going to be just disgusting. I better wear the waterproof mascara. Oh, well, that's awesome. That's rad. We're going to have an adventure. I'm super stoked about it. It's going to be cool. Oh, T, we should dress up okay. I mean, I would pick dwarf. I'm a
Mhm.
dwarf person. That's just how I feel about it. I'm more of an Art Deco kind of gal, but I feel like we should dress up in costume to go to this thing. That's just
Yeah,
me.
I was totally going to go for Elf.
Oh
So
yeah,
I
you'd
don't know
be a
if I
great
can.
elf.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can pull together a costume
I
over
think
the
you can
weekend.
do it.
Well,
You
I'll
know,
try.
you know what would be great is if you went as an elf, but not as a Tolkien elf, as like a Keebler elf. I'm gonna wear a beard because in Tolkien fiction, female dwarves had beards. That's true. I can do what I want.
Nice,
Fabulous. What
nice.
fabulous. You guys are all jealous. I know it.
Well, if anyone else is in the Milwaukee area and you want to go, this show, it's called J.R.R. Tolkien, The Art of the Manuscript. It opens on Friday and it runs all the way through the end of December, I think around Christmas time. And we'll put a link in our show notes so you can read the short article that I wrote, which also has a link to where you can get tickets and stuff like that.
All right.
So, yeah, very much looking forward to that. Here's some other entertainment news. I love this. So I haven't seen it yet. I think that you have, and I'm excited to see it. But this movie Prey came out.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good.
Well, yeah, tell us about that first.
Okay, well, first of all, believe the hype because it's red. Okay, the thing about this movie that stuck out to me first and foremost, and I don't know how many of you went and saw the new Ghostbusters movie with the kid from Stranger Things in it. Did you go see that movie at
I
all?
saw it, yeah.
It's a cute little movie. The thing about that movie that's remarkable is even though the story is completely different, a totally different setting with totally different characters, there was something about it that felt so much like the original Ghostbusters movie that it was like I wanted to cry about it. Like it had the flavor of that movie somehow, and it was marvelous. Prey does that too. Watching Prey felt like the first time I ever watched Predator. Like I knew it was going to happen, kind of, because like she's going to kick his ass, right? Like that's how it works. But I like it was like watching it and knew that feeling was new. Amber Mid Thunder, who is the lead actress in this movie, was absolutely dope as hell. It's also like the only movie in Hollywood history, really blockbuster movie that has an almost entirely indigenous cast, which is super neat.
Yeah.
This setting is beautiful. It's definitely eye candy, but it's just a really, really well done. I have not watched the Comanche version yet. I'm planning on doing that, but the English version is really, really good. It's simple and effective and fantastic. They did a great job.
Cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Um, so this is kind of people love it so much. They're like, why don't they do this with other horror franchises? You know, you
Yeah.
could usually like take different iconic horror figures and put them in different time periods. And even Stephen King decides he's going to weigh in, and he's like, you know what they should do? They should do a Predator versus the Children of the Corn.
Okay. First of all, can we take a moment to appreciate just the snarky darkness of Stephen King? What a fucking gem. If you don't follow Stephen King's Twitter account, you absolutely should. He spends
Yeah.
every second dunking on like conservative
Mitch
politicians from the state of
McConnell,
Maine.
yeah.
Amazing. And to think of this, of all of the villains, of all of the monsters, and all of the numerous books and stories that he's ever written, he had vampires, killer dogs. There was like, what, crazy clowns from the sewer. Although it would be fun to watch the Predator fight Pennywise the clown. That would be great. But of all those characters, Stephen King was like, you know what he ought to do? Face off against those little shits in the farm corn. That would be great. I love this plan because there's no clear good guy in that situation. Did you watch Alien versus Predator? Was that a movie that you watched?
Yeah, I've seen that for sure, or part of
Yeah.
it. I saw Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, and like those movies weren't bad. I didn't think they were terrible. Predator versus Prey was more of a big time science fiction situation, but the Predator has never gone up against a supernatural force before. That's never happened. So you'd be mixing genres there, which I think is great. Also, the Children of the Corn are the worst. Honestly, like if I don't know if Ray is watching, if she's out there, she'll be happy to tell you like creepy children are the worst monsters. Killer children are the worst monsters. And honestly, like the idea of the Predator just grabbing that little shit Malachi by the back of his rangy neck and just tossing him over the cornfield is so satisfying just thinking about it. I absolutely love it. And you don't know who's going to win. Like you watch a regular Predator movie, you watch a regular scary movie, you know who's going to win.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the girl with the smaller tits. That's it. She's gonna be the final girl. She's gonna win. That's it. You watch a movie like that, you don't know. You don't know who's gonna win. It could be anybody. It could be anything. But yeah, I think that's great. Somebody else said too that they thought it'd be really, and this apparently I guess is actually a thing. I mean, this is the chatter that they wanted to see the Predator go back in time and fight a samurai in Japan, which I think is a great idea, a super duper good idea because like the Predator has that kind of like code where he like won't kill you if you don't have a weapon. right? Remember? And
Yeah.
like in the second Predator, which I would argue is the better of the earlier Predators, the one with Danny Glover. Remember that one where they're in the city and it's supposed to be a not too distant future, but it still looks like 1987. Like he wouldn't hurt the pregnant lady. He didn't hurt the kid. Like he has a code. And I feel like the samurai has a code too. And it would be a thing where there was a moment where there was like, you know, warriors honor code situation, which sounds appealing to me. Who else could the Predator fight? The Predator, he should go back in time and fight the founding fathers. I love this. Yes, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, give George Washington like a laser gun, and like John Hancock can form some rudimentary trebuchet, and
Yeah, they need something like that. Otherwise, it'd be a short movie because they'd be trying to load up their muskets for like 10 minutes.
right.
And the Predator would just be like, pew!
But that's the point of the Predator movies. That's the whole point of the Predator movies is the Predator lands and he's got laser sights and he's got the invisibility jello shield and he's got like all kinds of wacky shit. And the people that he's fighting against have nothing, really. Like even in the end of the first Predator movie, there was no guns. They had nothing. They had to outsmart them. They had to outsmart them. That's part of the reason that Prey is so clever, because obviously he's landing 400 years ago dealing with native peoples. They don't even have like muskets. They got nothing. They've got bows and arrows and hatchets, and that's it. So this warrior has to figure out how to outsmart him using nothing but what's around her and what she's familiar with, and that's why it's genius. Ooh, also the dog is great. I love the dog in the movie. Super my favorite. Apparently they got that dog adopted from a shelter like right before the movie, and we're only going to have her in like 2 scenes, but she tested so well with test audiences that they put her in everything. And they wanted her because she's a very specific breed of dog. She's an American dingo, also known as a Carolina dog. And they're one of the oldest breeds of dog on Earth. There's skeletal remains that show that this particular breed of dog actually came over across the land bridge from Asia with the peoples who eventually became the indigenous peoples of America, which is why they wanted this particular dog. But she's just awesome. Fantastic. I think her name is Coco.
Cool. So I posed a question right before we went live here in the Tease Weird Week Facebook group. And I wanted to know what people thought, who would win, Predator or the Children of the Corn. Still very early. We don't have a lot of votes, but right now, Children of the Corn are slightly ahead. 60-40. 60% to 40% Predator.
Because they're terrifying. They're so scary. They're so scary.
But check out the Tease Weird Week Facebook group, and you can vote. We'll see what happens if the Predator pulls ahead. Still very early in the game on that poll.
So. Yeah, for sure.
Also, Ray is watching, and she did say, here's Ray's comment about Children of the Corn. I hate them so much. Timmy from Identity gives me the worst creeps ever. I'm not sure who that is.
That movie Identity. It's a great one. It's a classic. There's a Busey in it and everything. One of the characters in there is an evil little boy named Timmy, and he's the worst.
Okay. All right. Moving on to our next topic. We've got a couple stories related to extinction. And so we've talked on the podcast before, for sure, I think, about there's a plan to try to bring back the woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
Want them wandering around the tundra. And this very interesting story that's been circulating this week is that scientists are planning a multi-million-dollar resurrection of the Tasmanian tiger.
Yeah.
Which, of course, was killed off by people. I believe the last one survived into the 1920s or 30s.
It's the 30s.
And, that we know of. There have been people who have said that they've seen them, wandering around Tasmania, but generally considered to be extinct. So now they're doing DNA sequencing and trying to put together a plan where they can reintroduce the Tasmanian tiger, or its actual name, which is the thylacine, is what it's called.
Yeah. So, okay, there's a lot going on with this story. So there's an 8-second piece of black and white footage from the 1930s that is the last known footage of this last thylacine that I think it had a name like Bucky or Michael or something.
Ben, I think Ben or
Benjamin,
Benny.
that's what it was,
Yeah.
which is just too heartbreaking to even think about. I remember as a child seeing that on some National Geographic thing, and it was the first time I comprehended that human beings are capable of wiping something off the face of the planet Earth. And I was upset about it for weeks because I was a very sensitive and emotional child. But this beast that was there was like it had originally lived all over the world. The only place it was left at that time was Tasmania. And because it was the only mammal type predator, it was actually like a kangaroo or a koala, marsupial.
Marsupial, yeah.
Which is how they can bring this thing back to life. This is a crazy, crazy bit about it. They hunted them to extinction because they were like, they're eating our livestock, and that's why we are failing at colonizing, like Tasmania. That's not true. The reason they were failing at colonizing Tasmania is because European people had no idea how to farm Tasmania. It's a completely different climate, totally different biosphere. They ended up causing a lot more trouble for themselves by getting rid of this predator, which was actually very meek and timid and not dangerous really at all. And they hunted it until it was completely dead. So what they're going to do now is they're going to take its nearest cousin, its nearest genetic cousin, which is another marsupial carnivore, but it's only about as big as, like, I don't know, like a really big meatball. Like if you were going to just make a really big meatball, a very small, like maybe a hamburger. It's not big. It's like a shrew, essentially. The thing about it is that all marsupials begin their life really, really, really tiny. And then they crawl into the pouch, into their mom's pouch or whatever. So hypothetically, so say these scientists, you can make any sized marsupial that you want. And start with any size marsupial that you want, because the babies are always the same size. And then when they get to a certain size, we'll just take them out and put them into a synthetic womb, which is also a great band name. For sure. The thing about it is that they don't have enough DNA from the original thylacine to make a complete thylacine. So it's just like with the woolly mammoth. We don't have enough DNA from a woolly, like intact DNA from a woolly mammoth to actually create a woolly mammoth. What they can do is take its next nearest cousin, try and compare what they have of the DNA to the other creature. And because we have this technology now, they're essentially just going to copy paste the places where the DNA isn't the same. They'll just take that out and put the other DNA in. Then they change the cell from like this little shrew guy into a thylacine cell, or an elephant into a woolly mammoth. But it's not going to be the real creature. It's not. It's like a hybrid, essentially. So there's all kinds of questions people have about this. Like, how's that animal even going to survive? You have no idea what the temperament or influence, because essentially they want to rewild this animal. Eventually they want enough of them to re-release them into the wild, because they think it'll have a positive impact on the environment, just like when they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone Park. But they have no idea what this animal is actually going to be like. Like, the difference in DNA between you and a sheep is only 1%, really, 2%. It's not very, very much. So if they're off by 3, 4, 5%, that could be a completely different animal.
Yeah.
Totally different animal. I mean, like, literally, it could be any kind of monstrous thing, and they don't know. So on the surface, that sounds really sweet and nice and good. And I confess, when I first heard this story, because of my emotional connection to it, I was like, they're bringing back the Tasmanian tiger. Except they could totally not be bringing back the Tasmanian tiger. They could end up with some giant 12-foot.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, they're going to accidentally make one that's the size of a bus or something. And
right. Because the thing about it is that other marsupials, because there's not a whole lot of marsupials in the world, but think about your marsupials, okay? Possums, kangaroos, koalas, all notorious, like, bastards. Like, I guess possums,
attitudes,
right, like possums aren't really bastards, but let's be real, they're kind of gross, and they have big giant teeth, and they're not even technically carnivores, and neither are koalas, and neither are kangaroos. And a kangaroo will end your ass. They literally will box you to death. They will go into a lake and wait for you to come in after them and drown you That's the number one way that kangaroos fight predators. I mean,
Have you seen pictures of some of those kangaroos that look like they're ripped as
dude,
shit?
they're jacked. It's crazy. They look like they're all juicing. They have like an 8-pack, giant biceps. Right. So there's definitely risks involved here. Or you could just end up with an animal that was really sick and malformed, and that wouldn't be good either. Also, a lot of people are like, "Hey, cool, that's really great," but there are a lot of animals that still exist on Earth that are really close to extinction. Wouldn't your time and money be better spent trying to keep these animals from dying off? So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
This story is very interesting. It's kind of related. It's not the same. They're not trying to bring this animal back, but there was an insect that's a katydid in the grasshopper family. Its scientific name was Prophalangopus obscura.
Okay.
Intriguing name.
It is
And
intriguing.
it was kind of like this big grasshopper-like insect. And the last known one that they've found was from 1869.
Oh.
And since then, people have said that they've seen them, but there's no real proof. But they have this one specimen from 1869, and scientists studying like the shape of its body were able to recreate what the insect sounds like. And it's kind of this unique chirping sound. We're going to send the sound file to Andrew so he can insert that chirping sound right here. All right, wait a second. And and their hope in recreating this noise is that they can go into its suspected habitat, which is in India, and they can play this, and it'll hopefully attract the insect.
Oh, sure.
And then they can get a better idea of like what the size of the population might be. They can maybe get a sample so they can study it and see how they can help protect it. So
that's cool. Like when those people on Operation Bigfoot go into the woods and play Bigfoot sounds. And
yeah, right. Yeah, no, they do. It's
they do it.
Oh, what was it called? There's a name for it. It's like it's not just Bigfoot calling. It's call blasting.
Call blasting.
Yes,
is what
blasting.
They do.
Yeah, they bring out. I went out with a Bigfooter in Michigan. I think I mentioned that on this podcast before. And he had like a little amplifier and hooked it up to his phone, and he had some Bigfoot calls, and he blasted those out into the woods, hoping that it would attract the big guy.
To be fair, like, okay, there's nothing that says that insects don't have complex like auditory communication as well. They could. I don't know if you ever heard that record that guy did where he recorded the sounds of crickets at night and then he slowed it down. He figured out the equation based on how long crickets live compared to how long humans lived, and then he slowed the recording down by that much. And the sound of it is this beautiful angelic orchestral like choir sound. It's absolutely beautiful and gorgeous and amazing. So maybe that's like real communication and language. But it also makes me think of like when they played the recording of the elephant who had died to those elephants in the zoo, and the elephants all freaked out because elephants have a concept of death.
Yeah.
Remember? And they were like, holy shit, how's that possible? He's totally dead. Like, you don't know what's going to do to people, like to the animals, to hear that. Because they, like that guy, whatever that recording is, whatever that, it could be anything. It could be screaming, run for the hills. Like, Bigfoot's coming.
Yeah. Well, or even in the case of this insect, they recreate it, but they make different sounds to indicate, if they're trying to mate, if they're in danger and stuff like that.
Right.
So who knows what their interpretation could be. As we know, like if you're speaking trying to speak a foreign language, and you mess up one word,
right,
and it can get you in a lot of trouble potentially.
Oh my God, they could just get swarmed to death by a bunch of grasshoppers. Wow. Okay, the thing is, I don't think that people think about this, and these guys certainly aren't. Grasshoppers were one of the plagues from the Bible. Okay, locusts was a plague that like God sent down to punish us for being stupid. Like, you don't really want to accidentally call down a plague of grasshoppers. That seems like a bad choice. But I guess science says we can, so that means we should. That's what they said in that movie, right? Just because we can. That's my...
Just because you could do it, doesn't mean that you should do it.
Oh, they must have heard that backwards. Whoopsie.
We're going to talk about biblical plagues in a minute, I think. But before we move on, there was something circulating in the Tease Weird Week group about making a bug butter of some sort.
Bug butter.
What was that all about?
First of all, I think that this idea is getting way too much flack, and I don't appreciate that because it's actually a really good idea. So how it works is these scientists are like, hey, man, you know what would be super dope is if we took a bunch of bugs, grubs mostly, like worms and stuff, which I guess is grosser if you think about it. We're just going to soak them in water like we're trying to make almond milk. And then once they're nice and soft, we're gonna put them in a blender. And then once we've blended them up real good, we're gonna put that in a centrifuge, and all the fatty, squishy, slimy pieces will come out. And then we're gonna use the squishy, slimy, like bug marshmallow fluff, like butter, and we're gonna bake with it. And so that's what they did, and I guess it turned out pretty okay. I'd like to point out that you wouldn't know if you were eating bread.
That's what I was going to say.
You wouldn't know.
This might be unethical, but just don't tell people.
Yeah, like you would totally not freaking know. Also, you better get used to it, you guys, because the truth of the matter is that like big, large scale industrial farming is not sustainable. We are fast approaching a situation where like just having a giant barn full of 2,000 dairy cows is not going to be a thing that we can do anymore. The amount of like electricity and water and food that takes,
and the amount of cow farts with all the methane.
Is a problem. It's a super problem. We're going to get to a point in our world, and probably most of the people living here are going to live to see that, where like dairy milk is not a thing. And if you think we're going to replace it with almond milk, you're wrong. I don't know if you've witnessed like the drought that's been happening for the last 10 years in the places where almonds grow, but like that's not real. And the thing is like human beings can live off of berries and nuts and shit. Like we can do that, but we need protein and fats to survive. Like you ever watch that dude, Survivor Man? I love me some Survivor Man. Okay.
Yeah.
He does the thing where he goes for a week and he goes and hangs out somewhere way out in the wilderness and he like has to survive and whatever is there. He did one episode where he was pretending that he had crashed a plane way out in the middle of nowhere in Canada, right? It was winter time. And he was doing all right. This is a nature guy. He's nature boy. He's doing it. He's catching rabbits. He's doing whatever. He ate a rabbit every single night. But after the fourth night, he started getting super sick because even eating an animal like that, a rabbit is so lean. It has so little fat on its body. That his body was starting to break down. You need fats. So, like, if you want to survive in, like, the post-apocalyptic Mad Max ass bullshit that we could potentially have coming at us at any time now. Did you see Donald Trump sold nuclear seeks to the goddamn Saudis? Why is nobody talking about this? I'm really confused. Oh, that's a whole other conversation. If you want to live through that, you better get used to bug butter is all I'm trying to say. You should be so lucky as to have bug butter. Back in my nuclear apocalypse, we just stuck whole grasshoppers right into our mouth and crunched them up, and we liked it. So deal with that.
Bug butter.
Bug butter. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's good also. Like, don't knock it. Till you try it.
Well, like you say, people might have to try it.
Yeah. Like, get into it. I'm just saying that, like, in theory, sushi is gross. But I got news for you. Sushi is not gross. Sushi is delicious. So, don't, you know what I mean? Like, don't close your doors of opportunity. Maybe you'll be the biggest fan bug butter ever had.
Okay. So another topic we've got for tonight is a couple of stories about, how would I describe this? Inventions that are questionable.
That's my favorite kind. I just love it when people are like, there's nothing that could possibly go wrong with this, and everyone else in the world is just like, oh, what are you doing?
So this is the one that you're cracking up about. Here's the headline. Love it. I love it. I played the world's first Jesus Christ simulator, and I have questions.
Oh, my babies. I have to tell you that no matter what you think is going to happen with that headline, it's so much better than that. I absolutely promise you. This was brought to us from our friends at Vice, who are out here doing the Lord's work. Speaking of Jesus, at least once a week, they put something out where I'm just like, wow, nice. If you're not following them on the internet, I highly recommend it. I'm just going to give you some excerpts from this article because I tell you, it's freaking poetry. Okay, are you ready for this? Oh my God. So the game is called I Am Jesus Christ, which I feel is great because it sets expectations and it's very clear. It's soon to be released. He got a sneak peek at this amazing game by developers Simula M and Playway. The premise of the video game is to recap Jesus's actual life events, spanning to the time just before his baptism to his crucifixion and eventual resurrection, as you do. Now, that all seems very normal and reasonable, and I think that's really great. So what they did, though, was that they set it up. You start playing as Jesus. That's a thing that happens. The graphics are good. They're a little on the nose. Like in the title screen, the eye is represented by an image of none other than Jesus Christ himself, levitating in the air, his arms outstretched, ready for his ascension into heaven. That's really cool.
Village People style, like YMCA. He's making the letter I.
You know what? If you're Jesus Christ, you better know how to make an entrance. That's all I have to say. It's really important. So the game begins with his search for John the Baptist. As Jesus, I had to ask my fellow villagers where he was and then make my way to him without starving, which mostly meant picking fruits from the bushes along the way to keep my health bar full. So far, all very benign, all very reasonable. My eyes immediately went to the place in the article where it says, escalated quickly. In the next level, I, Jesus, had to fast in the desert while surrounded by angels training me to fight. Quite a bit of departure from the source material. Certainly no turning the other cheek in this one. So Jesus, like, you're not just doing Jesus stuff, okay? Like, it gets pretty wild. You could instead gather energy balls thrown at me by Satan and bounce them back with a magma-filled crater as a backdrop. Love this. Every now and then I had to stop and pray to recharge my Holy Spirit, which was consumed by the use of my powers. Oh, wait, where's the... after defeating Satan a la Dragon Ball, Jesus begins his preaching and his journey to Jerusalem. Apparently, that also included destroying evil crystals placed by Satan in several Palestinian cities. I also solved a bunch of puzzles in a celestial dimension to unlock new miracles, and then used said miracles in my preaching. It just gets better from there. It's absolutely fantastic. I think that everyone should check it out. So that they can, have a better understanding of the texts. And, you know what I think? I think C.S. Lewis would have loved this game.
Exactly. We'll put the link to this Vice article in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast. And yeah, the battle with Satan is so wild. They're like throwing fireballs at each other. It makes me like imagine like Street Fighter, where you're like,
yeah,
oh, you can.
Okay, here's the thing about it, and I'm going to try not to piss anybody off when I talk. Everything I'm talking about is academic theory and do not necessarily represent my perspective or the opinions of T's Weird Week at all. So, hypothetically, there's a going theory among some scholars that Jesus Christ was in fact an invented character. They believe this because of all of the similarities that the story of Jesus has to characters that had existed in one form or another, usually several forms, going back millennia. And that the story of Jesus was created at a very pivotal time when the Romans specifically were afraid of a slave revolt. And the slaves in question were the Hebrews, were the Jews. So these people were desperately waiting for salvation, for a Messiah to free them from like generations of slavery. So they started rumors of this character. They put out these gospels and they gave them a Messiah, but instead of giving them this flaming sword wielding Arnold Schwarzenegger ass, like, whatever, the Egyptians or whoever the hell was holding the Hebrews hostage, those people got their purse flipped into their lap so many times it's hard to keep track. They gave him this guy who was essentially just like the dude at a like camp out that has the guitar and plays Wonderwall, talks about gets really high and talks to trees and things. And they were like, meh, okay, whatever. The problem with it is that character is not necessarily riveting. So they had to add on a bunch of other characters who did badass shit, like fought the devil, and like, because in truth, like Jesus Christ never had a moment where he was like kung fu karate chopping the devil. That never happened. Like he flipped a table one time on a bunch of people who were trying to collect taxes, which I guess is pretty rad. But it's not like he was a dude that you could cheer for from the sidelines. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
the only story I remember about him with the devil is they had like a conversation in the desert.
right.
But they didn't start like busting out the kung fu and start punching each other and stuff.
Right. Now, as a civilized person, I respect someone who has diplomatic negotiating skills. But again, you're not going to watch that on DVD. It's just not going to happen. And the evangelicals, like the super American right-wing evangelicals, are definitely kung fu, like machine gun, like double-handed John Wick, like crazy, like that's their shit. And Jesus Christ is their dude. And there have been many attempts over the last, several years when we lost our goddamn minds and started to like lose the thread of the plot, where they have tried to recast Jesus not only as a white dude from the Middle East, which okay, but also as like some super ripped dude who was actually doing battle with the forces of evil, which super never happened at all. Not at all. At least not in the books of the Bible. And this video game, I think, is just like, I don't know if the people who wrote this video game are super Jesus Christ stans or if they just knew they had an audience.
Yeah.
An
audience is gonna pay.
Yeah, because that's a video game that you're gonna like. If you're a super evangelical right wing type person, you're gonna be happy to buy that shit for little Timmy, right? Like that's for sure gonna be under the Christmas tree this year, all the Christmas trees. Yeah, I don't know. It gives me the creeps a little bit. I'm laughing about it.
Yeah, I think that what you're onto there is they see the market is not being people they're going to sell to that actually want to play it. They're going to sell it to Christian parents and aunts and uncles who are going to give it as a gift to their kids because they're like,
right.
Oh, little Timmy loves video games, and here's a Christian video game, so he's gonna he's gonna love playing video games, and then he's gonna see, how awesome it was to surf across the water as Jesus and
Dragon Ball Z.
Create the fish and loaves to hand out to everyone.
Yeah, it's just weird to me. Like, I feel like people who would play that game for the irony, like I would play that game because that's fucking funny. Like, that's funny. Shit's funny. But people who fail to see the irony, which is my least favorite subclass of people, the ones who fail to see the fucking irony. Like Christianity there's a lot of things going on with it, but specifically the American brand of evangelical Christianity. Jesus was supposed to be the Lamb of God. If he was created to put down a slave revolt, he was deliberately written to be like, turn the other cheek, to be a pacifist, to be like this character who sat with the devil in the desert. He was definitely not crushing Red Bulls and fucking palming Satan's head and just flipping him over the dunes. And I wonder what kind of Jesus we'll end up with in like 20 years when these kids who are going to play this fucking video game are talking about like who they think this character Jesus Christ is. Like, I am interested to see. Very interested to see. Terrified and interested.
Yes. I want to play the game, by the way. So.
Oh, yeah.
Here's other completely whack invention news of the week. QAnon, man, they
Bless their
just
hearts.
always something with QAnon.
Oh my God.
And this week, this by the way is an article from the Daily Beast, is reported by a guy named William Somer, who, I wanted to give a shout out to that guy because he has been reporting on QAnon for the Daily Beast for several years now. That's sort of his beat,
Love it.
He keeps tabs on them. So when we talked about all the crazy stuff going on in Dallas, a lot of that was being reported by him.
Oh, nice.
So here's a new thing that they're into. It's called the Energy Enhancement System, or the EE system, and it's supposedly a miraculous healing device that can cure cancer, cystic fibrosis, and even autism.
Yeah.
It says, to the uninitiated, the EE system device looks like just a couple of computer monitors playing colored static, but EE systems devotees insist it's the real deal. They're willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a few hours bathed in the colored glow of the screens, and they line up for blocks for a chance to meet the device's inventor. There's a special deal. You can pay $1,500, in which you spend 3 days in a home run by this inventor, Sandra Rose Michael, soaking up as much time in front of the screens as you need. But if you want your own, you're going to have to throw down about $120,000 per device.
Yeah.
And to the uninitiated, they look like regular computer screens. That's because they are. They buy the stuff from Best Buy and then put this program into it.
By their own admittance.
Yeah.
By their own admittance, they just get the screens from Best Buy, and it's the program that's special and good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I have a lot of takeaways from this article, which I'd really love to sit down and speak with this journalist. I would really love to know what it has done to his mind following these people around for 5 years. I am fascinated to know what that is like. Because after a while you hear that stuff and some of it's got to sink into your subconscious, doesn't it?
Yeah. You start to feel like you're becoming a surreal entity yourself, because
right?
you're not sure.
Yeah, you for sure would question your reality a little bit, but all that aside.
Well, I mean, in a story like this, you see it and you laugh and you're like, there's no way people can believe this, but they obviously do. They're paying good money for it. They think it's curing their cancer and stuff, and then it starts to get, you kind of laugh at first, and then you're like, oh shit, this is really sad, actually.
Yeah, and there's a reason why I couldn't run that beat, is because there's a part of me that is perfectly well aware of all the things that we were told were nonsense that turned out to be true. But at the time we were like, that's ridiculous. That would never have happened ever. Nobody would ever. That's the most outlandish thing I've ever heard. Except it wasn't, because it was a really real thing. That's why I don't fuck with QAnon as a rule. But reading about this woman, first of all, she's already been taken to court for building nonsense contraptions and trying to. And I'd like to point out, too, that she's absolutely specifically targeting people whose loved ones are dying of horrible cancers.
Yeah.
That's her target audience. So
and there's a lot of very justifiable anger and a fear of the medical industry, because they're super greedy and unethical. So, I see where people are are interested in stuff like this. But
there was that whole thing last week where the medicine that they had been selling for Alzheimer's, which cost like $30,000 a dose. Seriously, $30,000 a dose. Not only was it not effective, the company that sold it knew it wasn't effective, and they had known it wasn't effective for 15 years and continued to sell it to these people. So yeah, I get it. The medical industry is real fucked up and shady. 12 billion%. And you never know what's going to solve the problem. You really, really don't. Penicillin was just some shit in the back of some dude's fridge. You don't know. We don't know nothing about nothing. But this woman is full of shit. She's definitely full of shit.
I think it's important to note that the pharmaceutical and medical industry is super greedy and awful, but so is the shyster, I'm gonna
Yeah,
sell you the snake oil remedy that's really iodine disguised as something more than it is, or is really
yeah,
an old computer monitor that's just blasting static on you. Those people are trying to rip you off too. That's what
yeah.
sucks about this country. Everyone's trying to rip everyone off. So
Right, right. Like
big and small.
the guy who discovered insulin, the scientist man who discovered insulin, he put it out into the world and refused to patent it because he thought it was really important that people have access to it.
Yeah.
That somebody who was out there, like the second people start trying to make a buck off of saving somebody's dying mother from leukemia, which is what this woman had been taken to court for, because she got these sets to try and save her mother from like leukemia, and then her mom was like, "Get that crazy garbage out of here." She had already put $20,000 down on it, and they refused to refund her money. They continued to take money out of her account because the total setup was $60,000. So she took them to court, and the court was like, "Can you prove anywhere that any of this has any actual effect on any diseases at all?" And she couldn't. There was no studies. There wasn't even anecdotal evidence that it did anything. It's not just a ruse. It's a poor ruse. It's a shell game. It's not anything. And in fact, there was a guy who invented a similar machine, and he said, "This is actually my machine, and it doesn't cure shit. The whole purpose of it is it's color therapy, essentially. It's
Right.
supposed to help you relax and, whatever, but it's definitely not for curing cancer at all. Plus, like, the second somebody tries to tell me they can cure autism, I fucking tune out. Because autism isn't a disease, it's the shape of your brain. You can't cure that. It's just it's fucking crazy. Like, medical science, as a general rule, the consensus is that's not a disease. So it bothers me because the people who are super against autism and they're like, we can cure autism, tend to be also anti-vaxxers, because part of the whole anti-vax thing is vaccines cause
Yeah.
autism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, yeah, just all kinds of red flags with that. And like, I'm not a violent person. I'm not. And like, I respect a good grift. Where would we be today if it wasn't for a good grift? But when you start targeting people whose like loved ones are dying of horrible cancer, I don't know if you've ever seen anybody die of cancer. It's fucking wretched. It's not cool or okay, and it's a horrible place to be in. And then you're like, I'm gonna scam this person. The woman who she took her to court, she didn't have $60,000. She sold everything she owned to put the $20,000 down in the hopes that it would do something to save her mother. They want to target these people, like, I don't know. I think if I saw Miss Michael out in the street, I probably would have some choice words for her.
Well, if you wanted to have words with her, you could apparently pay $1,500, and then you could go into her house where there's a bunch of people wearing a suntan bed, glasses, like laying around, soaking in these sprays. Can you imagine? What the hell?
I think it would be worth $1,500 to go into her house and give her a Cleveland steamer. That's what I think.
Okay, we're almost out of time here, so I thought we'd end on a cute weird story.
Yeah, let's do a cute one.
We were talking about the Loch Ness Monster, not just a couple episodes ago, because they had found evidence that a plesiosaur could be a freshwater animal, which means that possibly it could live in Loch Ness. And people were very excited because they thought that they spotted Nessie. But who would have guessed this as a thing? It was actually an alpaca out for a swim in the loch there.
Oh. Well, I mean, to be fair, like, you don't expect to see like a llama in Scotland, so that is pretty strange. It was still a weird thing that you saw. It just wasn't a plesiosaur, And I like that nobody was trying to, like, the person whose llama or alpaca that it was just like, oh, it's just me llama or what.
Going for a dip in the loch.
But they were very apologetic. They were just like, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to lead you on. It's just an alpaca. Like, that doesn't mean there's not a Loch Ness monster, but this is just an alpaca. So try again next week, you guys.
Awesome. All right. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Heidi.
Wouldn't it be weird if people were like out checking out Loch Ness and they see a thing and they think it's a Loch Ness monster and they get real excited and then they're like, it's just a llama, and then out of nowhere Nessie comes and just chomps the llama and eats it. I love it. Fantastic.
All right. Well, that's going to be our show for today, but we'll be back next week for T's Weird Week. So have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.